Hello and welcome again. Thanks for staying tuned. It's good to know that you're there. Yes, it's been quite a long time. I've not been able to post on this particular channel. I'm sorry about that. I actually gave time to my other channel, which is Agric and Health, and I thought to come back on this now. Now, in the previous videos, we already started on swords, and we've already looked at the rules of swords. We've defined what swords are, and we looked at the rules of swords, and then the basic form of swords and the similar swords. So you want to go back to the previous videos and then watch so that you'll be able to continue the flow. However, today, coming back after a long time, would not go straight into some of those kind of a bit difficult one. We'll just go refreshing ourselves briefly. Now, what we'll be having is a quick try on this and multiplication of swords, basically. Now, just to remind you, swords are simple, maths simple. Now, what seems to be difficult for some people is a write-off for others. But whichever way, depending on how it's been taught and the teacher, and also your readiness, you could grab these things fast. So if you listen carefully, I know I do a good job explaining things. So just pay attention. So let's go. Let's pick the first one. Now this is basically multiplication of swords. I pick the first one. Solution to each one. The first is simplify 27 times root 50. Root 27 times root 50. Now when you see this sign is square root sign. In order to make it short, the short form just say root 27 and root 50. Now remember in the previous videos we talked about you pick it out. These are the steps. You will just say something like this is 27. Go to your times table, or if you already know it, you pick out root 27 is the same thing as two numbers, two factors of 27. Try and look for one in such that one of them should be a perfect square. So in 27 we have 3 and 9. So the best way to do it, just because 9 is the one that I have 3 times 9 is 27. So because 9 is that which have the perfect square root, so we can switch it by saying 9 times 3 is still the same thing. 9 times 3 is the same thing as 3 times 9. Please. Now, this is the same thing as putting it this way. Root 9 times root 3. In this case, we've decided to separate them. In other words, like you put our food together, let's separate them in different plates, just like that. So since the root is for the both of them, we separated them. Now 9 has a perfect square root, and 9 is essentially 3 times 3, right? So if you have the square root, 9 is actually essentially 3 times 3. So the square root of 9 is actually 3. Now what is square root? A number that when it's divided, so when it's multiplied by itself, will give you the number in which you're square rooting. So 3 is the number that when you multiply by itself, 3 times 3 will give you 9. So what you do in this case is 9 root 9, square root of 9 is the same thing as 3. So square root of 9 is here as 3. This multiplication side is down and this one is here. Why do we repeat 3? 3 doesn't have a perfect square root. So we'll bring it down just like that. Now, there are some numbers that have perfect square roots. Let's list them. Number 1 is 4. Because 4 is actually 2 times 2. Another one is 9. Because 9 is actually what? 3 times 3. Another number is 16. 16 is actually 4 times 4. So you see 2, 3, 4. So the square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 4 is 16. Square root of 9 is 3. and the square root of 16 is 4, and so on you go. So you can have 25 here, because 25 is essentially 5 times 5. So the square root of 25 is actually what? That one number that when you multiply by itself, it will give you the number that is being square rooted. Now, so that's it. So we've done with it. So 3 times this will give you 3 squared. So 3 root 3. So, but no need to do it separately. Let's go gradually, let's bring it down. Now, what is 27? 27 essentially is 9 times 3. Right? I've already done it here. Then, what is 50? 50 is the same thing as, look for 2 numbers, break 50 down. The thing is this, 27 doesn't have on its own a perfect square root, but it comprises of 2 numbers, in which case one of the 2 numbers, which is 27, comprises of 2 numbers. These are the 2 numbers, and one of them has or is a perfect square. Or put it the other way around, one of them have a perfect square root, and that one is 9. So that is why you put the square root of 9 to the 3. So the same thing will be done with 50. 50 is the same thing as 2 times 25. Okay, now look here. 50 is the same thing as 10 times 5. And it's the same thing as 25 times 2. These are the only 2 combinations that will give you 50. But which one of them will give you, which one of them has a combination, in which case at least one of them has a perfect square root? 10 doesn't have a perfect square root. 5 doesn't have a perfect square root. 25 has a perfect square root and actually happens to be 5. 25, square root of 25 is actually 5. So this one qualifies. This one doesn't have a perfect square root. But at least let's go for the 2 combinations that gives us 50. And in which case one of them has a perfect square root is this combination, 25 and 2. So that's why I've chosen 25 and 2. I didn't choose 10 and 5. So let's go. Now this is okay, but it's better to rearrange it. I've done this on purpose. Rearrange it. So you don't need to be doing that. Just know that the one that has a perfect square root should be the first written. You have it as 25 times 25 times 2. Because the 25 times 2, that gives you 50. So let's separate them. This is the same thing as saying this is the square root of 25 times the square root of 2, right? So what's the perfect square root of 25? And this is just 5. And this one doesn't have a perfect square root, so it remains as 2. So what we have is 5 times root 2 is what? 5 root 2. So take these things individually and bring them here. That is essentially what we're doing. So this is what? 50 is the same thing as what? 25 times 2. So we'll separate this. Now make this one 9 times root 3. This times multiplication sign here, and this is what? 25 times root 25 times root this, right? So this one has a perfect square root. The perfect square root of 9 is what? 3. And this doesn't have a perfect square root, so you repeat it. 25, does it have a perfect square root? Look at it. Perfect square root is 5, so you have it as 5. 2, does it have a perfect square root? No. So we'll bring down this square root, so it doesn't have a perfect square root. But let's put this together and put this together, right? 3 times root 3 is what? 3 root 3 times 5 times root 2 is 5 root 2. There is no other way. Okay, before I even draw the line, I should have told you that there is no other way you process further at this level. You don't process further. So So this is how it's going to be left. So what you have as your answer is 3 root 3 times 5 root 2. So if you solve this question, if you solve it, expand it again, you will come back to this place. Now let me do that quickly so you know it. Maths is such that you can go this way, and if you follow the right step, the reverse order, you'll come back to where you go into, where you were. If you discover you find it difficult coming back, you probably have made a mistake somewhere. Let's see again. Now, to prove that this is correct, now let me come here. I will have, let's have 3 root 3 times 5 root 2. So what does this mean? This means what? That I actually had a square root of this, the square root of 9. I actually did the square root of 9 to give us 3. So this will mean that these 3 actually, okay, let me even expand it further. This will be 3 times root 3. And this is what? 5 times root 2. 3 is the same thing. 3 is the same thing as what? Square root of 9. Is that not true? True, because the square root of 9 will be the 3. So, trying to make it look the same, look similar. And then this one is 5. What is 5? 5 without the square root sign on it is the same thing as 25 with the square root sign on it. So, multiply by 2 square root. So, you just have it. If I pull this together and pull this together, so what we have is 9 root 3 times 25 root 2. 25 times 2, all rooted, this rooted. So 205 times this is what? 50. Root 50 times 9 times 3 is what? 27. Don't forget your square root sign. So what have we come back to? We'll come back to this place. 27, root 27 times root 50. Root 27 times root 50. That's maths. We'll stop here, and then in the next we'll look at this. But before we come back, please try your hands on this and see if you can do it. If you have any question, let's have it in the comment section. Thank you so much. Let's see you in the next video.